Hi, welcome to the 27th episode of Startups Rights. Today, my guest is Dr. Nirmesh Patel. He's a VC investor at Amino Collective. Welcome, Nirmesh.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a while since someone's got my title right. I worked hard for that PhD, so I'm glad to
No,
hear
no,
people using the term doctor.
no. I try. Especially since my time in US, I try my best always. And you worked hard for this, you said. So why not? Like, why shouldn't refer
Yeah,
to you as your own title? Nirmesh, very happy to have you on. Really excited for our conversation. Especially your insights into biotech and VCs, and you have a very interesting background. Um, and I have some questions ready, obviously, on the side. But before I start, I always like to start with the very beginning. With your professional and educational background and your journey to VC, your transition to VC. Could you walk us through your background?
yeah, sure. I'm guessing you don't want me to go all the way through back to my childhood, and no one wants to go into that closet and open and look at those skeletons. Um, but yeah, let me start from like my my undergrad, how I got into this space, and go from there. So like I kind of got into cancer research originally because of a little bit of arrogance back when I was young. Um, Thought I was one of the smartest people I knew, which wasn't that wrong. And I should be applying myself to the hardest problems out there. I think looking back, it was just this drive to have an impact. That's why I wanted to work on the hardest challenge. And then that arrogance took me to be like, let me just work on the hardest thing out there. And so that's how I got into cancer research. Wanted to really make a big dent in that space because it was so complex and we just needed smart, hardworking people to be in there. Did my master's there, did my PhD there, looked for new drug targets, and then at a certain point, I found like the process quite easy of us finding new drug targets and drugs for cancer patients, but we still aren't very good at matching them to the right therapy, especially in the context of tumors constantly evolving and gaining resistance. And so I set up a company with a couple of my co-founders at that point to solve that problem. Grew that for about 5 years. Went through Y Combinator in 2017, which really helped us take off, and then got acquired in 2021. At which point, I had this moment of like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? Like founders generally tend to tie their identity to a startup, to their startup, and then yeah, there was this big kind of moment of like, what am I doing? I did a bunch of different things to figure that out, and long story short, found my way into the world of venture, where for the past 3 years I've been running deep tech investing at a New York-based venture fund. I led about 17 investments there myself, pre-seed through to Series B. And then, yeah, kind of just came to this realization that being a generalist was great, even though I was mostly focused on the deep tech stuff, but I really just wanted to double down on bio and health. When I thought about, as if I were to go and start a company now, the number of funds that I would love to work with was too little for a founder to actually make use of. And so, yeah, I set about trying to go and look for a very dedicated health and bio fund that really just got it, and came across Amino Collective, and we just really hit it off. I really hit it off the rest of the team, and yeah, have been here for the past like 6 months now.
Very nice. I have so many questions from what you said. I guess one of the first ones would be, you're a VC investor who has a founder experience. You're a scientist, you founded your own company, and then you moved on to VC investing. Do you think building a company, having a first-hand experience in company building, is an integral part of being an effective investor?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends what you want from your investor, and I always see like founder VC pairings as like a matchmaking thing. Like founders generally need to understand before they go into the fundraising process what they really want from their VC partner, and then go and look for that partner that fits that. And then on the other side, VCs really need to know like where can they be helpful and where can they not. There's a lot of VCs that would love to just get involved in everything and sometimes just get in the way, either intentionally or unintentionally. And then there's lots of other VCs that are just a bit too hands off. And so finding that right balance is hard, but finding the match of the founder that wants a specific kind of help where you can definitely help is the thing that the whole process is all about. So I think it is important. Like having the founder experience is definitely important. I can empathize way more with founders of what they're going through. I like to be seen as like the first call that founders make when shit hits the fan, and that is definitely useful. yeah, there's definitely huge positives with it. I can't think of any negatives. So yeah.
Fair, fair. And another thing you mentioned about Amino Collective, and you hit it up quickly. And there are a lot of VC funds who invest in biotech and deep tech. Is there anything like unique and different when it comes to the Amino Collective's thesis and approach to investing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. So when we think about like who's investing in health and bio right now, there's like the traditional venture funds, big blue chip multi-stage funds that kind of have been doing this for decades now. They're still a little bit kind of behind in the thinking of like what's coming down the line, and they're stuck in the kind of areas of we're going to stick to single asset therapeutic investing and stuff like that. And funds like that do need to exist. But I think they're going to miss a lot of what's really exciting right now, and how computation, software, and AI is going to change a lot of what we're doing in health and bio, and just not move fast enough to capture that opportunity. And then on the other side, there's the generalists that do understand the kind of tech angle to it, but don't have enough understanding of the health and bio angle. And so there's this big gap in the market of people that understand both sides, and I think Amino Collective fits squarely within that. And then we're a very thesis-driven firm. Like we spend a lot of our time thinking about how do you build a big company in this space. And I think this is where a lot of other investors kind of fall a little bit short, because if you're dipping in and out of bio while you're being a generalist in other spaces, you don't have enough time to really understand what's going on, understand the landscape, and understand like how do you actually build something big? How do you get to an outlier event here rather than just placing a bet and moving on? And so we take that approach. And then I think the last thing and most important thing is the type of founder we look for. If you look at our website, that stuff isn't just branding. It's something that we have internalized. It's something that is completely in the kind of founder we're looking for. Like we don't look for people that pretend to know it all. We look for the ones that are like looking for answers. And those are the ones that are going to be the most adaptable, the most agile as they build a startup, because as any founder knows, building a startup is not a straight line to anywhere. It's a roller coaster. It's a windy road. Like you've got to go on lots of twists and turns. And the ones that are open and curious about what's going on are the ones that will be able to handle that the best. So yeah, that's kind of like where we fit, and where I see we're quite different to others.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your background, as you said, as you already mentioned, that it was in cancer research. So I'm sure like anything that related to cancer, it's a piece of cake for you. You understand it quite well. But we see investing usually
Yeah,
spans like many, as you said, like even in health bio, it's such like a vast area. There's computational, there's other stuff that you really have to have a decent understanding of, and you can be specialist in everything, and you will never know the
yeah,
company as good as the founder does, right? Like they know it well enough to start a
exactly.
company. So how do you evaluate startups that kind of go out of your expertise area and like span into different areas, and how do you approach that evaluation process?
Yeah, I'd start by saying, like, even in the field of cancer and oncology, like I don't know it all. Like when I say this is how we truly operate. I don't know
Yeah,
it all. Like, yes, I've done a PhD. Yes, I've started a
yeah,
company in the space, but there's
yeah.
so much more to the
True,
space than I
true.
can like pretend to know. And so yeah, it's the same with cancer as it is with anything else. Like when I'm coming up to a highly technical kind of idea or company or whatever it is in its ideation or building stage, um, yeah, I lean on like the technical expertise that I have. The basis of it, like the foundation of it, of like getting a PhD, is understanding like what's good science versus what's bad science. And then I kind of like, rather than evaluate something on based on like is it good technically, I try and understand like the market problem first, and understand what is it that they're trying to solve for before I even think about is this technology the right thing for it. And then it's just going out and understand, like we're very thesis driven. We go out and try and talk to as many people about what's going on in the market, try and build our own view, our own opinion of what we think can make a difference and what we think won't. And we're going to be wrong with some of those, but that's fine. And then we go and look for those companies and find the technologies that do fit that, with the founders that want to build to that. But sometimes, like when I'm looking at technology, like I I won't know whether it's going to work or not, and even the data in front of me will only give me like signals of something. But other times I'm just like, well, in those times I'm just like, theoretically, could this work? Like scientifically, is it possible? Do we have the things? Do the technologies exist today to be able to make this work? And if the answer is yes, then it's okay. Like we're going to take some technical risk in some things. Let's go for it. We know what that looks like. We're happy doing that if we can comfortably get behind it scientifically. Other times, I don't know it's going to work, and then I've just got to put the comfort or the conviction on the fact that this founder is going to be the one that makes it work. Whether like they just have the pure drive that if anyone is going to figure this out, it's going to be them, and that's who I'm betting on. And so that's kind of like how I see like going into areas that I don't really know enough about. And obviously, yes, we lean on like KOLs and stuff in our network, and we've got a great, fantastic network of great scientists and founders and people in different industries that we can lean on to ask them what their thoughts are. But we generally try to come to our own opinion based on some of those conversations.
Got it. You touched upon something already, which I was going to ask, but I still want to get your kind of more specific insight because, like, whenever you talk to VCs, I mean, VC is as an industry is intrinsically very risky and very and uncertain. That's why it's called venture, right? Like you don't exactly know if it's going to work out or not. But at the same time, there are VC funds that get consistent returns. So there's some kind of a formula to that, right? But at early stages, obviously the risks are even higher, especially in biotech and deep tech, because the tech is really complex. It's very niche, and usually the time horizons are long, right? Yeah. And, whenever you talk to VCs, they usually talk about the founders, credentials, founder backgrounds, and, they talk about the market, right? But besides those things, right, like what do you like to focus on? What do you like to assess? Or like what frameworks do you use when you look at companies at their early stages?
So the first and foremost is looking at the team aspect, the founders and their background, their motivation to doing this. Like one of the main things we look for is urgency from the founders. And so like I always tell people like the best defensibility any startup has is the speed at which you move. Like you can have the strongest patent on whatever you want, but if someone infringes on that patent and you're still just at like pre-seed stage, you're not going to be able to fight that. You're not going to be able to defend it at all. And so your ability to defend that patent is based on your ability to exploit it and grow and move quickly enough that you have enough money, you're big enough and you have enough money at a certain point to stop anyone infringing on that patent. And so it's like, your speed is the most important thing. And so really, really look for founders that just want to move and get stuff done. And alongside of that, be adaptable. Like just moving in one direction isn't the way to build any startup. You've got to be able to take in lots of different data points and react and make decisions very quickly. And I don't mean like change what you're doing every week, because that's not a good way to operate either, but there's a fine middle ground. That's what we look for on like the team aspects. Also like looking for the domain expertise and making sure there's founder problem fit. And then dive deep into the market side, the market problem, and understand, is this going to be big enough? Is there actually a multi-billion-dollar opportunity here? Who else is doing what in this space? Why do we think any company can win? And we try and separate the company at this point when we go into the market and just try and understand the market as a whole, who's playing, and think about like if there were to be a winner in this market or a multi-billion-dollar opportunity in this market, what could that look like? Are there multiple types of what that could look like? Can the market support that? And then we come back to, okay, this company, is it building towards something like that? And if the answer is yes, then we continue down the diligence process. If the answer is no, then we kind of drop them at that point. And then we go into the tech. And this is surprising for a lot of people, especially because we're so specialist. People normally come to us thinking, they're going to dive into the tech straight away. But really, like, yes, on a high level, we can understand the tech, but like, and that happens on the first call as well. But really, we don't dive deep into the tech specifically until we understand that there is the right team here and there's the right market dynamics here that we want to back, and then go deeper. Because otherwise we could spend all of our time in fantastic science. And I can spend lots of time talking about science and thinking about science, and that's not the best use of our time.
Yeah. And the science part is really interesting because it's bringing an idea from the lab to the market is not easy. And you're a scientist, at first hand, right? So that kind of really a nice segue to my second question, to ask a question. So like as a scientist turned founder turned VC, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on this. What are some of the biggest scientific and technical challenges in translating groundbreaking research from the lab to into scalable market-ready products, and what can we do? What can be done about those problems?
I think maybe this isn't quite answering your question, but I think the biggest challenge is getting scientists to think more about the market problem than the technology they're working on. Because everyone spends their PhDs, postdocs, it could even be a master's or undergrad project working on a technology for a specific use case, and then you just keep working on that technology and try and build it into a company. But no one ever stops to think, let me just drop the technology for a second, forget what that's doing, think about the market problem, understand what people really want there, and then come back to what's the best solution for that, and then see if it's that technology. And if it's not, then you should be working on something else. People normally start with the technology and then try and fit it into a market problem. And then there's all sorts of weird nuances of like, yes, it might be the best technology to solve that problem, but then the customers don't like buying that kind of technology or don't operate in a way that that technology will allow them to. And so you're going to need bigger kind of structural changes in the ecosystem for it to actually work. And so if they start with a market problem and work their way back to like, what's the actual solution here, they might end up with a very different kind of proposition. So I think that's the biggest challenge to like getting stuff as a scientist into market.
At universities in US, I studied my college in US, and I've been around people like at Yale and Harvard, and there's a lot of things happening that try to foster that entrepreneurial mindset and spirit in scientists. And you did your PhD and undergrad, I believe, in London, at King's College London, right? And you're investing in companies in UK too. So do you think UK is doing enough to foster that kind of like entrepreneurial mindset in scientists, or do you think there's still that work needs to be done? Is that
We're going in the right direction. From when I started a company to now, there's been a lot of things that I've developed that are generating more of this entrepreneurial interest. And I think the more we do that, the better we'll get at it. There's a cultural change that needs to happen alongside of it that has been happening over time, but it's not something that can happen overnight. And I think we're going in the right direction. We're not quite to the level of the US where they really kind of drill into people from quite early on that you can just do this. Like, it's the American dream, right? It's built into like the DNA of the country. It's slightly different here, but it is moving in that direction where people kind of just realize they can throw out the rule book. They can just do what they want. And once you liberate yourself in that way, then you start thinking more freely of like, okay, if I can do whatever I want, what is this going to look like? What's the biggest thing? What's the hardest thing that I can work on? And more people like that come through. I think the more we see people like myself and other founders that have gone through that journey from scientist to founder, the more we're going to have those people reaching, like paying back to the community and helping show people this is a path. When I was starting to do this, there were very few scientists that had gone to found a company, and the ones that had never really spoke to anyone about it. But actually, there's an interesting story. Like when I was starting my company, I was still finishing my PhD at King's, and in one of the labs that I was working closely with, there was a PhD student there as well. I didn't realize until a year and a half after I'd left my PhD and started my company that she was also working on her own company, and she'd then gone and started her own company. No one ever spoke about this. We never spoke about this between us, because in academia there was this whole thing of like, if you're leaving even to industry, you're a failure, you've given up. And so people just kind of hid it from each other. I think that's a lot different now. You're getting a lot more like entrepreneurial labs coming through where like the PI is supportive of their PhDs and postdocs starting up companies and things like that. So and you've got groups like Nucleate that really help kind of bring this pool of talent together, and they're doing a fantastic job. Great people coming through there. So yeah, there's a lot more happening in the UK, and I'd say across Europe as well. But there's still work to be done, right?
Yeah, always. One thing you at the very beginning of our episode, you mentioned about single asset, kind of like VC investing, and I was reading an article not long ago by, I believe, was the NFX venture capital co-founder, and I was talking about this asset-driven models and the platform models. And it's made me curious. I'm interested to hear your opinion because there are some biotech firms that, they face a critical decision, right? Like, should they pursue a more platform-driven approach versus asset-driven approach, right? Do you see this as a kind of like a binary choice, or do you think this is more like a continuum? And how do you think startups should approach this decision?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely a continuum.
Continuum.
Like there's definitely, so there's been a debate over the past like couple of years that I think is like really settled now, but people still keep having it, and I don't think we'll ever actually settle it. But there's been this debate of like platform versus pipeline, especially in like healthcare bio companies.
Mhm.
Lots of people for a while were thinking, oh, you can just focus purely on platform. Don't worry about pipeline. Just funnel all of your cash into developing this platform. And then at some point, you can then just magically make money either through partnerships or through eventually developing your own pipeline or some method of that. Um, when interest rates are low and VC dollars are flowing, that's fine. You can keep funding money into the platform. But at some point, you need to capture that value. And most of the time, capturing that value comes from having a drug asset, a therapeutic that goes with that platform. Now, I'd say it's a continuum because there are some companies that develop a little platform and then they have a lead asset that comes out of that platform, and then all of the money that they raise goes into developing that lead asset. And then the platform's really just like on a back burner and usually gets cut at some point, and then they become a single asset therapeutic company. There are others that develop the platform and purely take it down a partnership route, and they go to like pharma companies to kind of farm off a lot of their assets, and it depends what that looks like. That can be successful, and there are lots of examples of that, but there's many more examples of that not being successful
Mhm.
because the number of insights that you can draw from that platform, the number of therapeutics you can get out that are going to be better than anything else from that platform are limited. And so once you start partnering them off and giving them away, you've lost a lot of the value that you can capture. And so finding the multi-billion-dollar opportunity there is a lot harder. And then the ones in the middle where they develop the platform, partner off a few of their assets, but are very intentional about keeping some of those internally so they can develop them themselves, help them get the cash to develop the platform even further, but also develop their internal assets and then bring their own assets to market. And I think those are the ones that find that right balance are key. But we need to have a focus on pipeline at some point because that's where maximum value capture can happen. There are lots of companies where if you can totally go down a purely platform approach, and that can work, but there are very few of those, and finding those is very hard.
Got it. Just to kind of like summarize and clarify for myself, you say the right balance is probably something like having a platform like you have some partnerships which fuel money into your company, and then you use that money to essentially develop your own lead asset. Is that the right balance, or correct me if I'm wrong?
Kind of. I mean, you can use that money for whatever you want, really. But
Yeah.
I think the key is you don't. If you're developing a platform, your platform should be relatively cheap to develop
Mm.
and grow. I think a lot of people end up putting like 40, 50, 60 million into platform development, which should, which is fine, but also, are you really going to get assets that are incrementally, like significantly better or just incrementally better by funneling that into the platform? And then when you do get those assets, if they are only incrementally better, your valuation or the value of that asset isn't going to be supporting of what you've pumped into the platform. And so, yeah, there's kind of a mismatch there a little bit.
Got it. Very interesting. Eh, That's really cool. And actually, I want to ask one more question. I forget about it. But when you once you invest, usually like most VCs are not completely hands off. They try to like stay as board members, board directors, board observers, and they try to like stay in touch with the founder to provide support. And usually, when you ask, is the support? I mean, beyond provision of the capital, support is like helping find right talent for the company's chief business officer, chief financial officer, whatever. In your opinion, you're a VC investor, and also you had a founder experience, so you really know the ins and outs of starting and building a company. What unique support do you think VCs can and should provide to biotech and deep tech startups? And are there areas where you think investors can help kind of like sort of bridge the gaps?
Yeah, I mean, I I genuinely think this has to be driven by the founder and what they want,
Mm.
because you can provide support on various different things. I can say I'm always going to help you hire whoever you want, and that's great. But like maybe that's not what the founder wants. Maybe they're fantastic at hiring whoever they want anyway. Um, I can say that I'm going to help you strategically think through like how to develop your pipeline or your platform strategy or anything like that. And again, they know their company better than I do. So all I can really do is like challenge their views, be a thought partner. But like if I go in and start telling them, if I go in and start challenging their views and be a thought partner on platform pipeline strategy when they haven't asked for it, I'm just going to be an annoying investor, and that's not where I want to be.
Yeah.
Um, they should be held accountable to a certain extent, and I will question some things, but I'm not going to sit there and pretend like I know everything and I know it better than them, and so tell them what they're going to start doing. So I'm mostly driven by what the founders asking me for. But because I have this nice helicopter view, I can also look forward or like look across to like different sectors and different examples of where this company can go and see what went right and what went wrong for them and start just pointing out like, oh, look, just watch out for this. This might be something you want to think about sooner rather than later because this is what happened to another company. And this is where we can be supportive. And I think that's where VCs can really be helpful, just pointing out things that founders haven't thought about yet, because sometimes you can't see the wood through the trees.
Got it. That's really interesting. Really interesting. We're moving towards kind of like the final segment of our episode, which is more about your biotech developments and insights. And I'm really curious because there's a lot happening. It's very hard to keep up with everything, right? I try to read endpoint news, sifted, whatever, but there's always so
Yeah,
much happening. Um, so AI obviously is the same, and it's. I feel like I didn't see it when the internet and dot-com bubble happened. I was still a child, a baby. But I am in the age where like Gen AI is really defining the future, and I think it's probably one of the biggest revolutions of our time, in my personal opinion. And it's increasingly being applied to biotech and deep tech startups, right? In so many different ways. What are some of the specific ways you see AI advancing these fields, and are there limitations or risks that you think we need to?
yeah. I mean, I think everyone knows AI is going to change this field quite significantly. There's various ways this can happen. Lots of people trying to just use standard models and create wrappers and do little bits here and there and not really make a big difference in this space. But there are lots of people that are trying to do big things that really change how we fundamentally understand biology, how we fundamentally create better drugs against certain targets, how we just like revolutionize completely what we're doing. And so finding the signal from the noise is very difficult at this point in time. But this is why taking a step back and just understanding like what do we actually think is going to happen here is important. And we've done a lot of thesis work and where we think there are going to be winners and where we think there's a lot of hype, but we're not entirely sure there will be a winner. And so there's certain parts where we think like, there are some companies developing only a new model, a new AI model that can do a very specific thing. And then they're building up that model, spending a lot on compute and data generation and stuff. But like, well, not data generation. That's the hard part. But like building a model and then using it on publicly available data, and then trying to like actually get to something from that and develop insights, develop drugs, whatever. But like most of the data sets that are public now are kind of like been looked at by everyone. Like the field is moving so quickly that every researcher has looked at PDB, has looked at like big genomics data sets across the world and found what needs to be found. And anything you find extra, you can definitely find some extra. But again, is it going to be significant or is it going to be incremental? And where do you actually want to play here? So like I think the ones that are going to end up winning are the ones that also sit on top of data generation. And so the ones making their own proprietary data to then create their own insights, to create their own drug assets, to create their own new targets and discover new biology and stuff. I think that's where we're going to find a lot more winners.
Mm.
But then there's also lots of AI happening across the drug discovery value chain, right? Like you can go into predicting clinical trial success, and there's ways of doing this that can work a little bit, and some people have started to show good data on that, but success is kind of limited still, and I think there's a lot of improvement that we can do on that front. You can even go further into like the bringing a drug to market and the commercial side of that, and predicting sales. There's lots of stuff across the value chain that you can start looking at, and I think lots of people are focusing on the very early stage right now of doing like novel target discovery, which generally tend to be low value depending on which field you're doing it in. But there's a lot that can still take place that people have kind of ignored until now, and I think it's going to be exciting seeing what happens. I'm not going to pull out my crystal ball and say this is where I think people should be building. Again, that goes back to like our whole thing. We are thesis driven. We take an opinion, but also listen to what's happening in the market, and things are changing so quickly that you've got to just be on it and find what's happening.
Fair. What are some of the developments or emerging kind of trends or technologies that excite you personally?
I'm always super excited about looking at what can happen in novel therapeutic modalities. Similar to what I said before, like there's a lot that's happened around small molecules so far that I think is fantastic, and there's some good work still to be done. But there's a lot of positives and negatives, but a lot of positives of new therapeutic modalities like macrocycles, like cell therapies, like biologics, peptide therapeutics, all of these things, RNA. There's lots of opportunity still left in those sectors. And I think we're going to see those take up a lot more market share away from small molecules, where small molecules just kind of aren't the right fit, but have been used because it's the best thing we've had to date. And I think jumping on those modalities and seeing who's able to create best-in-class drugs there is super exciting for me.
Got it. And more hypothetical question, but if you could pick one grand challenge within biotech to be solved in your lifetime, what would it be and why?
Oof. I would genuinely like to see like proper personalized medicine. I think there's the heterogeneity between like you and I, or even like me and my brother, is so large that we won't respond the same way to anything that we're given, even if we have the same disease. Like we're not gonna, unless it's like a monogenic disorder, which kind of rarely happens nowadays, or they're called rare diseases for a reason. Like we're not going to respond in the same way to certain drugs, and so understanding like seeing a world in which we actually reach true personalized medicine is something that I think is a big grand challenge that a lot of people like to say we're solving for already, but we're not even close to it. And I think there it's more like new technologies are coming out that can help us do that better, but I think it's more of a market change that needs to happen. And I think payers, pharma companies, and everyone needs to kind of come together and understand like, how do we actually make this work, but also in the framework of everyone still going to make a lot of money from this. It's just going to be done in a slightly different way. And there's going to be pain in that restructuring and a lot of like people falling through the cracks and stuff. But I think we're going to come out better for it. A lot of people are probably going to say that's not kind of big vision enough, but really and truly, like that is the biggest thing we can solve for a lot of people.
That makes sense. And do you think we're still, like you already said it, we're not there, but do you think we're way too far off from that, or do you think it might happen?
Too far off.
Way too far off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like with everything that we have access to now, it's still crazy to me that we're not closer than we are.
Wow. This every time I talk about anything to do with biotech, it's so fascinating because there's so much, and like the more you know, the more little you think you know. It's beyond fascinating. We're at the end of our episode, and Nirmesh, I guess I have one final question. So there's some PhD students watching this. There's some undergrad watching this, interested, in starting their own companies, getting into biotech, and it's getting. While there are a lot of VC funds that are, funding, and obviously the market was a bit rough, but it's recovering now, so there's a lot of funding will be available too. But the competition is pretty fierce too, and since a lot more people are aware of entrepreneurship, a lot more people trying to become entrepreneurs too. What would you advise to early stage founders who are trying to build something in biotech, health tech, or tech bio?
Do it.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah, I'd say make sure you have the right reason to do it. Right motivation to do it, because when shit hits the fan, if you're doing it because startups are cool, they become very uncool very quickly in your life. If you're doing it for the money, well then are not making the right life choices because there's likely not that much money because most startups fail. If you're doing it because you really are obsessed with solving a certain problem and you just can't let it go, then you should do it. Definitely. Like that's the exact kind of person that should be running a startup and building this thing, because being obsessed with a problem is most likely going to get you to the right solution to solve that problem. And if it doesn't work, don't see it as a failure either. I think a lot of people are scared of going into it because maybe subconsciously they just are scared of failure. And what I've noticed over the years, especially on the US side, is they wear their failure on their sleeve. Like the really good founders and the really good people that just try stuff and do stuff, they wear their failure on their sleeve and they're like, yeah, I tried this, it didn't work. This is what I learned. And then I tried this, and then this is what I learned. It didn't work. And then I tried this, and oh look, that did work, and now it's kind of grown into this thing. And so there's nothing wrong with trying and failing stuff. The problem is if you don't try at all. So yeah, do it. Go for it.
Very, very wise and optimistic perspective. I really like it, Nirmesh. Nirmesh, thank you so much for your time. It was my genuine joy and honor to have you on. And thank you with the hopes of staying in touch.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.